Hello friends and welcome to this another chapter of interviewing skills module. In this chapter we will have a look at one of the most important question that you may come across. And this question is, have you ever had a conflict with a boss or a professor? How was it resolved? So this question is important for many reasons. First thing, that as in earlier chapter we have seen that how you had answer about the working in a team. Correct. Now while working in a team, you may have some conflict or dispute with your boss or professor or your colleagues. So this question will be probing those areas of your working style. Right. So before we move ahead, let us understand that how this question can be asked in a different manner. So the possible questions would be, how are you dealing with conflict? What do you do when you disagree with others? Do you open up or close down in conflict situations? How do you handle disagreements? So these are the few ways an interviewer can ask these questions in a different way or different style. But the moral of the question remains that he wants to understand how you deal with conflicts. So if we see that what is going on in interviewer's mind while asking this question. So basically, now these kind of informations are not there on your resume. Means it is but obvious that if you had a conflict with your professor or with your boss or with your colleague, you are not going to mention it on your resume. So interview is looking for information that normally would not be offered on resume. And as a standard interview process, how the candidate deals with conflict. So many excellent employees have seen their downfall in how they handle conflict. So the interviewer knows that most candidates will not offer up a true conflict situation. So the practice interviewer will continue to drill until a real example is provided. So it is a normal human tendency or human psychology that they would not reflect on this part in their resume or even during interview. So obviously majority of the people will come up with the stories which are really not true. So the whole intention behind asking this question is that interviewer is trying to find out how you behave when you have a conflict or disagreement with your boss or with your colleagues or with your peers, and how you handle them. There is another dimension to it, that the way you handle conflicts in an organization or the way you approach conflict management in an organization also determines the culture, because many organizations would be having a different culture, an open culture you can say, wherein they would prefer to sit across the table and resolve the conflict, and nobody feels bad about it. So if you're a kind of person that who would stick to your point and prove your point right and keep on iterating the same thing over and over again, right, then the interviewer may think that you are not suitable in our company culture. And here it is important to understand one thing, that even if you are technically very sound and very, means you are a subject matter expert, but the way you deal with people and the way you handle teams, the way you behave in an organization, that is the determining factor for your selection. Because if you see a comparative right? On technical skills, two candidates are 10 on 10, right? They are super efficient in their skills or in their technical skills. But when it comes to working in an environment of a team, working in an open culture, one candidate is say 4, rated as 4, and one candidate is rated as 7. So the candidate who has been rated 7 on the skills or the soft skills will be getting hired in an organization, and not the person who has got 4 rating, right? So that is one of the reason why developing soft skills is one of the most important aspect of your career progression. So now let us look at what should be, or what could be the best approach in answering this question, right? So first thing is that please be honest and give a real life example, right? And talk briefly about the conflict, but focus more on the resolution of the conflict, right? And if you give an example, then walk through the situation which brought up the conflict, what actions you took to resolve the conflict, and what was the end results, right? So you can frame it in a way that you give a brief description of the conflict, and make sure it is a real life example. Why I am insisting and focusing on real life example is because if you make up a situation, if you create an hypothetical situation, right, and when further probing happens and interviewers start asking and digging in more deep and more deep and more deep, right, you won't be having answers. Initial 1-2 questions you will answer it in a proper way, but afterwards you will fumble because it is not a real life example, and you have made it up, and that is the reason you will fumble. If the case is it is a real life example, you have really gone through that examples and you understand the various dimensions of the conflict. So whatever questions may be asked, you will be able to answer successfully. So I again insisting, please do not make up any conflict situation. Give a real life example, and then give the background of the situation, and then focus more on what kind of resolutions you had, actions you have taken to find out the resolution, and what was the end results. So now let us see an example. So if you are an experienced candidate, right, so you can start something like that. Means I recently had a conflict with an employee in another department who had a project and which was dependent on work being done by myself and my 2 other team members. He had sent recently an urgent email accusing us of derailing his project. I had never met him before, so I asked to get together with him for a coffee. So we met in a cafeteria, and I asked him to walk me through his entire project and the interdependency of his project on our project. I then walked him through our project and timelines. So once we had an opportunity to communicate our independent priorities, we could begin talking about our shared priorities. So we agreed upon to a timeline that would help us both to meet our goals, and the conflict was resolved in this way, and before it become a major incident. So you can see here that how the context was set, how the background was given, what actions were taken to bring out the resolution, how the communication happened between the 2 people or the 2 employees over their shared priorities, and then they came up with a win-win approach. So this is the kind of answer you can give. Your situations and positions may be different, so depend on that you can give this kind of example. So now if you are a student, right, then you can put it in this way, that I recently had disagreement with one of my professor over wordings of a question on one of the key exams, which was missed by several members of the class due to ambiguity. I brought it up with the professor privately and personally, and he was dismissive on my request. After discussing it with several classmates, we went to him together to discuss this further. At that point, he agreed that there was a level of ambiguity in this question, but still would not change the grades of the test, or which still would not change the marks. So, however, he appreciated us that for bringing this point to his attention, and to compensate those things, he gave us an opportunity to work on a separate project to get some more marks to make up the shortfall of this particular test. So we completed the extra project and we got our marks, which were compensated, and we all were happy with the end results. So it was not the solution that we were seeking, but it was a compromise, and that was acceptable because finally, ultimately, we got compensated with our marks, right? So if you're a student, then see how the background was created, and a positive approach was highlighting in this answer, right? And as students, they were open to feedback, right? But then ultimately, the professor did take opportunity to compensate it. So if you're a student, then you can put it in this kind of framework. So now let us see how not to answer this question. So there are many people who always have an attitude, or say approach, of showing other people's mistakes, and they always try to prove that the way you are doing it is wrong, and you should do the way I am doing, and it is always right. Right. So these kind of people would have definitely many conflicts with their colleagues. So never ever talk about these kind of conflicts, right? And second thing, that never bring personal or family conflicts in this kind of examples, that I had a conflict with my parents and or my sister or my brother, and then we did this and we did that. Never come up with these kind of things. Always keep it professional. There is no need to bring family and personal conflicts into these kind of conflict management questions. Right, friends? So we have seen how to handle this thing, how to handle this question. So important thing over here is to remember that the interviewer is asking this question just to see that how would you behave or how would you respond during a conflict situation. And these conflicts basically may happen. Means it is not that case that conflicts do not happen in an organization, because when you are working, then obviously conflicts may arise. So, but most important part is that how do you handle this conflict? That is more important. So thank you very much for patiently listening to this chapter. See you in next chapter. Goodbye.